I'm Rachel Hernandez, real estate investor turned mobile home investor and best-selling author. I make a living investing in mobile homes for cash flow for long-term passive income. After many mistakes and lessons learned, I've been able to create the kind of life where I can do the types of things I want to do, not have to do. I created the Adventures in Mobile Homes podcast to share with you what I've learned so you can spend more time with family, friends, and do things you love. Mobile home investing can help you get there. If you want to hear real stories with practical and actionable advice you can use from someone who's been in the trenches and who's still investing today to create the type of life you love, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Well, hello there, and welcome back to another episode of the Adventures in Mobile Homes podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Hernandez, aka Mobile Home Girl of AdventuresinMobileHomes.com. Thank you so much for joining me here on the 56th episode of the podcast. Now, just in case you missed it, be sure to check out the last episode where I talk about how to research mobile home parks for your mobile home investing business. You can find it at www.adventuresinmobilehomes.com/55. So today, I'm going to talk about an article that I recently did about the subject of driving for dollars. And in this write-up, I go over my recommended tips and tricks when driving for dollars to generate leads on sellers to work with as a mobile home investor. Now, I think this is a very important subject because this is one of the areas that a lot of investors first starting out, well, they get hung up on. Many times, they don't know exactly how to approach finding sellers to work with for their own mobile home investing business. And I will tell you, there's a specific process on how to exactly do it, especially if you're working in mobile home parks, like I do, and like Lonnie Scruggs, the godfather of mobile home investing, did as well. Because honestly, there's a right way to do things and a wrong way. And in my article, I go over some of the things that I did wrong when I first started out to find sellers to work with. And I also share with you some of the things that I do right to find sellers to save you both time and money. Because the last thing you want is to make the same mistakes that I did or other investors have made, especially when you've got the resources to get the knowledge that you need, like this podcast. So, are you ready to dive in? It's going to be an exciting topic today. But before we move on, let's hear a word from our sponsor. Hey there, Rachel here. Have you enjoyed the show and podcast so far? Has it helped you with your own mobile home investing journey? And have you received value from it? If yes, then consider supporting the show. So, how can you show your support? Well, there's a couple of things that you can do. The first thing you can do is leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or anywhere else the podcast can be heard. Go to www.adventuresinmobilehomes.com/podcast to see the sites and links where you can leave a review on. I'll be ever so grateful if you do. And you may even get a shout out and your review read right on the show, just for doing it. Another thing you can do is support the show and buy me a coffee. If you know me, you know how much I love coffee. If you've gotten a lot of good information out of the podcast and it has helped you as a mobile home investor, I'd love your support. Now, in the future, I'll be giving shout outs to those who support me. So if you do, that may be you. Go to www.adventuresinmobilehomes.com www.adventuresomobilehomes.com/support for more information on how you can show your support. Again, www.adventuresomobilehomes.com/support. And if you want to take it a step further and receive exclusive only content, consider being a member. On the support page there, you'll find info about how you can view exclusive content, including access to new videos and blog posts, a shout out in a future episode for your support, access to video replays on my past speaking engagements if you haven't seen me speak yet, and more. Check out www.adventuresomobilehomes.com/support to find out more. Thanks so much for continuing to listen to the podcast and for your support. Now, back to the show. Okay, first things first. Before I get into things, since we're on the topic of driving for dollars, just in case you missed it, be sure to check out my episode on the subject, which is episode 53 of the podcast. Here, I go into what driving for dollars is and some background information on what it's all about and how it's helped me as a real estate investor as well as a mobile home investor. You can check it out at www.adventuresomobilehomes.com/53. Getting back to things, if you've got some knowledge on what exactly driving for dollars is, then you'll know that it's one of the things that you can do as a real estate investor to get an advantage over others, aka the competition. Because in this day and age of digital technology, let me tell you, there are a lot of people who think that you can just browse the internet or listings all day and find deals without even leaving your house. And it's funny because there was actually a mobile home investing guru who was teaching this method who recently scammed a lot of investors out of their hard-earned money. And just in case you missed it, you can learn more about it on episode 46 of the podcast titled Scam Alert Mobile Home Investing Guru. You can check it out at www.adventuresomobilehomes.com/46. Now, I will say, this method of browsing listings online, it may work, but it's a numbers game. And honestly, even if you do all that work, is it the best use of your time? Personally, as a mobile home investor, I prefer to play the odds. I'd rather focus and do something that not many real estate investors are doing, like going out into the field and upping my odds that way of finding sellers to work with. Because honestly, it makes things so much easier. And aren't we all in this to do just that? I don't want to make things harder for myself, but it just takes some dedication and time to do it, just like anything. So in my article, I go over the tips and tricks that I recommend and do that have worked when going out to find sellers to work with for my own mobile home investing business. And I share with you what has worked and what has not worked and why. Because I'll be honest, I've tried so many things throughout my career as a mobile home investor. And it's funny because I was doing so much thinking that I was working really hard to get the results that I wanted. But in the end, sure, I was working a lot, but it wasn't productive work. It was just busy work to make me feel that I was being productive. But did these things that I did really produce the results that I wanted to get to my goal of finding sellers to work with? And the right ones, which I don't get into here, but I may cover it in a podcast episode down the road. And I can honestly say they didn't. So it took me to take some time to step back, get away from the business from an internal perspective, and step outside of myself to figure out why things weren't working the way they were supposed to or the way that I planned them to. And it took me a while to figure this out. And that is why I decided to write the article so that you can hear my story of what I did, the mistakes I made, so you don't make the same mistakes that I did. Now, getting back to things. So, what else did I go over in the article? Well, I do a deep dive on lead generation when going out to drive for dollars to find sellers to work with. I talk about the best techniques that have worked for me, as well as those that didn't work for me when going out to find mobile home seller leads. I also go on to talk about the types of people that you need to be networking with and talking with to generate not just any type of leads, but focused leads of motivated sellers in the areas you want to do business in. Because it's one thing to just go out there and put out a lot of marketing materials in all kinds of places, which, by the way, I did, and looking back, was a complete waste of time. Though it was a big mistake in terms of my time and money, I did learn which lead generating techniques gave me the best use of my time and efforts. And it's funny because the harder I worked, the less I got in return, and the less I worked but was more focused and strategized better, the more I got in return. Call it the old 80-20 rule when doing business. In the end, working smarter, not harder, allowed me to get more focused leads in the areas I wanted to work in, which led to doing deals and creating the cash flow that I wanted to achieve it as a mobile home investor. And just in case you missed it, if you'd like to learn about my story about how I got to where I'm at, be sure to check out my latest featured article titled From Burnt Out Landlord to Real Estate Investor: How I Sold My Portfolio and Invested in Mobile Homes, which was recently featured on a website about entrepreneurs and their journey with close to 2 million visitors per month. If you'd like to check it out, I'll link it up here in the show notes. Now, getting back to things, it's funny because a shotgun approach when it comes to marketing, it does not work in this business, meaning you do all kinds of marketing all over the place, especially if there are multiple methods that you use and put to use. I mean, it's one thing reading about all the different marketing methods out there to use as a real estate investor or mobile home investor. And trust me, I've tried them all. But it's another thing to go out and use the marketing methods that actually work today, in the present day, through experience. Because not all of the marketing techniques that you hear about actually work all the time. And the results depend on the person doing them. So take it to heart. Know what works for you and your personality going in. Honestly, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't use a shotgun approach when it comes to finding leads for motivated sellers. I'd sit down, take the time to write out a plan, and think things out thoroughly, doing a more focused approach on the marketing methods that are tried and true, that actually work to help you find motivated sellers so you can actually make money as a mobile home investor. Because isn't that what's most important? The results? It's not always about busy work and doing all of this work when you're out there generating leads. It's about getting results. So it's best to work smarter, not harder, when going out to generate leads as a mobile home investor when you're out driving for dollars. Now, along the lines of working smarter, not harder, I also go into the types of people that you need to network with and how to find these people, as well as what you should be talking to them about, including how you approach them when driving for dollars. These are the types of people who can help you find these mobile home leads and generate the leads that you need, the types of leads that you want, which are more qualified leads. Because, as I've said before, in this business and any other business, it's not about quantity, but quality that counts. Because if you go the quantity route, you'll get plenty of leads, but you'll have to sift through a lot of unqualified buyers, not to mention people who will waste your time wanting all kinds of things for you, or even worse, people who are curious like looky-loos, who really have no intent on doing business with you, but are just calling you to pique their own curiosity. So either you can learn from a pro like me and check out the article, or you can go out and do things using trial and error, which takes up a lot of time, not to mention money when you're out there driving for dollars and visiting these parks. Because in the article, I take you step by step on my process of generating leads to find sellers when I personally am going to these parks and driving for dollars. And I will say, a lot of investors just starting out, they get this wrong and approach the entire process the wrong way, which in the end costs a lot of time and money. And if you're like me, I'd rather learn from someone who has the experience and can tell me what works and doesn't work versus doing things myself and going in blindly. Sure, what works for me may not always work for someone else. Results will vary, but it gives you the knowledge of knowing and trying these methods before others, which may not work for you. At least you have the knowledge going in on what is working and not working. You can try these methods, and if for some reason they just don't work out for you, then you can try other methods. But believe me, these are the most tried and true methods of lead generation in this business. And I will say, if you are persistent and try these methods and can push through the hurdles, you'll be able to get the results you need when going out to find leads for motivated mobile home sellers. So there you have it. What I talk about in my article about driving for dollars on my most recommended tips and tricks when going out to find sellers to work with. Again, I go over the process step by step in my write-up and exactly what I do when it comes to marketing and networking to generate mobile home seller leads when going out to find sellers to work with. Honestly, I share with you things that I don't talk about in the podcast or in my blog, Adventures in Mobile Homes, just in the write-up. And this is a series which is the first part of the write-up on driving for dollars and my recommended tips and tricks, because there's so much to cover on the subject, and I have so much to say. Now, this write-up on my recommended tips and tricks when going out to drive for dollars, generate leads, and finding sellers to work with is available to members of my support page. And if you'd like to learn more about what I have to say on the subject and exactly what is involved to get the results that you want when driving for dollars, I'll put a link here to the article right in the show notes. And if you're a member of my support page, be sure to check out the article and stay tuned for the next part in the series where I'll be going over buying criteria and exactly what to look out for when driving for dollars as a mobile home investor to continue the series. Getting back to things, so if you've enjoyed my podcast and want to access exclusive content like this, consider becoming a member of the support page. And as a member, you'll receive access to these types of detailed posts and video and audio on my private podcast, where I go more into detail on specific topics within mobile home investing. Plus, you'll get discounts to special events, and here's the kicker: discounts to my existing courses and classes, including a special extra discount to my Dodd-Frank and SAFE Act course, especially for mobile home investors, just for members on my support page. So you definitely don't want to miss out on this special deal. Sign up as a member today. And just in case you missed it, I did do a video walkthrough of the support page and what it's all about. You can find it on episode 52 of the podcast, where I celebrate the 2-year anniversary of the show, what it means, and my plans going forward. You can find it at www.adventuresonmobilehomes.com/52. Again, www.adventuresonmobilehomes.com/52. So, I hope this episode was helpful and gave you some things to think about. Again, if you need to check out any resources that I talked about here, I'll be putting them in the show notes. You can find all of the resources mentioned, as well as my write-up on the subject, right here in the show notes at www.adventuresonmobilehomes.com/56. Again, www.adventuresonmobilehomes.com/56. And if you enjoyed this episode today and you like the content that you hear, please share it with a friend. Well, that's about it for now. Until next time, this is Rachel Hernandez, aka Mobile Home Girl of the Adventures of Mobile Homes podcast, signing off. Thanks for tuning in.